Joe Sullivan, sports editor for the Boston Globe. Joe, you with us this time?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. All right, we got this working. So, Joe, what we were talking about is these upsets. Are they good or bad for college basketball as a whole?
Well, I think they're good for college basketball. I think one of the things you were talking about, the idea that any team can win, which isn't necessarily true 100%, but that there's a lot of teams that can win and advance far in the tournament. That didn't used to be the case. So I think it's a good thing. I think it makes for more interesting matchups, and because the results are in doubt, and upsets are highly possible. And that, again, to me, that's interesting.
Hi, Joe. This is Max, one of the two Maxes we have on the show today. But my question to you is, what does it say about the selection committee that a team like Butler can get to the championship game twice in 2 years and never be one of the top few seeds? Do you think they were just seeded wrong, or do they really turn it on when they get to March?
Well, I think they were seeded correctly. They didn't even win their league. They did not have a great regular season until they made the Brad Stevens, the coach, made some changes in the lineup. And it came right after a loss, and I'll be darned if I'm going to remember the date. I'm thinking it was sometime in January. But they lost to Youngstown State, the Penguins. And that loss, it was, to me, as astounding that Butler could lose to Youngstown State. But he made some changes in the lineup, and they haven't lost since. So you can't ignore losses to Youngstown State when you're filling the tournament brackets. I mean, they have to be penalized for that. So I think their seeding, in some ways, they were lucky to be as high as they were based on how their regular season went. Wisconsin-Milwaukee was actually the regular season winner in the Horizon League. So, but excuse me, Butler beat them in the conference tournament, and the Horizon League only got one bid. I wonder if Butler would have been, they would have been borderline to be in the tournament at all if they didn't win the conference tournament. So their seeding's about right, and they've outplayed their seeding because they're playing a lot better now, certainly than they were when they lost to someone like Youngstown State.
And so, Joe, the other Max here, Max Block, focusing in on the championship game, obviously, tomorrow night, you have UConn and Butler. Who is the one player on each team that really needs to step up, and who's going to be the game changer for each team if they want to be able to pull off the win?
Well, I tell you what, I think Kemba Walker is going to, he'll play well, he'll score some, a certain amount of points. What Butler can't let him do is score 36, 40 points. Mm-hmm. They got to play team defense and stop them. So the reason I stated it that way is that's where my thought starts, that they're not going to let Kemba Walker go crazy because Butler's too good defensively, too well coached to let that happen. So what's the key matchup from there? And I'll tell you what the key matchup is. It is Jeremy Lamb and Shelvin Mack, let's call them the shooting guards. Shelvin Mack for Butler and Jeremy Lamb for UConn. Who's going to win that matchup? And I think that'll be a real critical matchup in tomorrow night's game. And on the face of it, Mack is the more veteran player. He's a little bit, he's stronger, certainly a clutch player. But Lamb in the last month has been shooting like he's Richard Hamilton's little brother. So it's hard to pick, but I think it's hard to say who's going to win that matchup. I would lean toward Mack because he's a veteran, but it's going to be interesting.
Hi, Joe.
So that's the key matchup.
Yep.
Hi, Joe. It's Dylan here, and my question is, many people are talking about, the matchup that we have right now, but most people didn't have besides me, and a lot of other people who picked UConn to win, most people didn't have any of these teams in the national championship. And I was just wondering, who was your original pick to win the national championship?
Oh, Ohio State. I had Ohio State. I was most of the year, I have a blog on the college basketball called Sully's Court, and each Monday, starting in November, I pick who I think would win the national championship. And I had Pitt as my selection almost the entire season. And but then I saw that they had lost a little something toward the end of the season, and it proved to be true. they lost to UConn in the Big East tournament, and they lost to Butler in the Ncaa tournament. So I switched over to Ohio State late in the season, and I really thought after the Big Ten tournament when Ohio State swept through it that they were clearly the number one team, that they had some things other teams didn't have, that they were well balanced. They had a great big guy in Jared Sullinger. They could play defense. The only thing, their only weakness was they weren't very deep. And when it comes down to it, they lost a close game against Kentucky, another good team. And one of the, I heard you guys talking before while I was hearing you while we were having the technical difficulties about what makes the NCAA tournament what it is, how great it is. Well, what's different than, say, an NBA 7-game series is that it's one time. It's one and done. It's life and death right there. So that's when these upsets happen. That's why they're monumental. And you can have just not your sharpest game. Ohio State didn't play that poorly against Kentucky. They didn't play well enough, and then they lost their national championship chances because of it.
Hello, Mr. Sullivan. This is Jason. So what do you think about VCU getting to the Final Four?
Well, I must admit I was astounded. I got to admit, I agree with what everyone was saying. I didn't think they should have been invited to begin with. And they had, going into the tournament, here's what's different with them. They had some of the worst defensive statistics in the tournament. And they've changed entirely. They started playing great defense. They were causing turnovers. They disrupted everyone. They disrupted Kansas. And that just wasn't something they did the whole season. That's something we hope the Celtics do in the playoffs, is what VCU did in the NCAA tournament. Just turn it on when you have to. Because VCU finished fourth in the Colonial this year, and they still got an invitation. And I think, they beat George Mason in the semifinals of the CAA tournament, and I think that's what got them in, because George Mason had a 16-game winning streak, and they were going to get in no matter what. And I think that's what swayed the committee. Obviously I'm guessing, but that's what I'm thinking had to have happened. I think that suddenly a light bulb went on, and they played great. You can't deny how well they played during the tournament. And I think it's going to be interesting what's going to happen to them, that school now. I think their coach will leave. I think he'll become the coach at North Carolina State. And then their point guard and their center graduate. So I don't know how good they're going to be next year.
Joe, I got one more question for you. It's Max Block again. So a lot of people were saying at the beginning of the tournament that the Big East is really dominating, that some people had 2-3 Big East teams in their Final Four. It didn't really work out too well for the Big East. A lot of the teams fell early in Louisville and Pittsburgh and Syracuse. But still, UConn, they finished 9th in the Big East regular season standings. They're now in the championship. They have a great shot to win it all. Is this a good thing for the Big East? Have they really shown that they are the best conference in college basketball? Or has this kind of been a setback, the fact that a lot of them have lost?
Yeah, the results in the tournament don't reflect that they're the best, that it was the best conference in college basketball. But in fact, it was. They deserved all the bids they got. It changes from year to year, and you got to compare it to how other conferences are playing throughout a whole season. They were the best conference. They haven't performed that way in the tournament. But I'll just, it's sort of what I said just a few minutes ago about how this tournament works. Why did Louisville get beat? Because a guy threw in a 30-footer with 2 seconds left for Morehead State that, no one was expecting. That's the type of thing that can happen in this tournament. I think Pitt lost their edge. And Notre Dame, the same thing happened to Notre Dame that happened to Louisville. Notre Dame ran into a Florida State team that suddenly started making shots they hadn't made all season, and then in the next round against Virginia Commonwealth, they missed them again. So these things can happen in the tournament. So no matter what the results are in the NCAA tournament, the Big East was the best conference, and they deserved all the bids they got, in my opinion.
So Joe, Alex Barth here. Final question. Lights are on tomorrow night. Whole country's watching. Who wins?
Boy, I really think this is going to be close. I think we've learned our lesson not to pick against Butler, haven't we? On the face of it, you wouldn't think this is a game. But I just love the way Butler's playing. They're so well coached. They're so mentally tough. UConn obviously is more talent. I think this is a game that's going to be close, and I think I like Butler in a close game, like something like 67, 64, something like that, in that range. That's my pick.
Okay, thank you very much. Joe Sullivan, Boston Globe sports editor. Thanks for dealing with technical difficulties, and thanks for being on the show. On the other side of the break, Celtics and Bruins, so make sure you stick around.